It's time to huddle up. I'm Garrett C. Wright. This is the Daily Huddle for Thursday, August 24th. Thanks for making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. We certainly appreciate it. If you're watching on YouTube, drop a subscribe, give us a thumbs up on the video. It goes a long way in helping the channel. And if you're listening on the podcast, go ahead, drop a 5-star review. Let us know how you think we're doing, and that helps as well here on SaturdayGlory.com. It's Thursday. It's week 0 coming up on Saturday. And so football is finally back. It's finally here. 19 straight weeks of college football. I cannot wait until week 0 kicks off. So we'll talk about that coming up. Well, there's a whole bevy of stuff that we haven't got to this week. So we're going to rapid fire Thursday it and get to all of it. It came out late last night that there is substantial movement towards SMU, Stanford, and Cal being back in play, and there being a real possibility that those 3 schools could join the Atlantic Coast Conference in the near future. Now, one of the things that is on the table is SMU is virtually trying to buy their way into a power conference where they have said, hey, for the duration of, or for the next, I think 7 years is what it was, we will not take a dollar of the TV money from the ACC. 7 years is an eternity in college football. I know that SMU has big boosters and they got a lot of money behind them. 7 years is a long time to not get any money. I think maybe the argument is the money that we have been getting from the American Athletic Conference hasn't been substantial enough that it can't be covered by a booster here or there. But compared to everybody else in your conference who are getting dozens of millions of dollars, it's a big difference. But if you are doing everything you can to get your school into a Power 5 conference, and that's what it takes, then that's what it takes. But the one thing I wonder is adding 3 schools to the ACC, when I would say it's fair to believe that Florida State, Miami, and Clemson are all looking for ways to get out of the ACC, is adding 3 schools when 3 schools are looking to leave. Is that a coincidence? Is that strategic? Maybe a little bit of both? Because you want to stay at your number, right? You want to stay. You don't want, because you just watch this happen to the Pac-12, where they lose UCLA and USC. And they go back to down to the Pac-10. When you're the Pac-10, you're vulnerable, as we've now seen. So I wonder if that plays into the idea of the ACC saying, we're at 14. We can be all right if we pump this number up and Florida State, Clemson, and Miami somehow finagle a way to get out of this thing. On the flip side, if Florida State, Clemson, and Miami find a way to finagle themselves out of that thing, I don't think it's unrealistic to believe that North Carolina, Duke, Virginia, Virginia Tech, Georgia Tech, maybe, depending on who you believe in the Big Ten's hierarchy of potentially wanting a school like that, also find a way to finagle themselves out of that conference. And then you get a group of, Boston College, Wake Forest, NC State, SMU, Cal, Stanford, Louisville, Syracuse. Like, wait a second, what? So there are other things at play there in the ACC expansion. But is it strategic, or is it a coincidence that you're looking to add 3 schools when 3 other schools are like, I don't want to be here anymore? I don't know. Brett Yormark is the commissioner of the Big 12. He had some interesting comments yesterday. If you haven't heard them, here they are.
In addition, candidly, we were able to get Texas and Oklahoma out a year early. That was a big deal for us, and I think all of you, okay? And Coach, I'm not going to put any pressure on you, but I'm going to be in Austin for Thanksgiving, okay? And you better take care of business like you did right here in Lubbock last year, okay?
So that's the Big 12 commissioner speaking at Texas Tech to the athletic department, that video courtesy of Texas Tech Athletics. I think Brett Yormark is the perfect guy to lead the Big 12 at this stage. And I think that's a really imperfect set of comments. You can feel that way. And I don't think anybody would believe that anybody in the Big 12 felt otherwise, that, hey, I would like to see Texas and Oklahoma lose as often as possible in their final year in the Big 12. But you can't say that. You got to keep that all bottled up. You can feel it, but you can't say it, and you don't got to say everything you think. You cannot let that happen. You cannot let those feelings out. And I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the day, there is a graphic on the Big 12 Conference Twitter that's a statement from Commissioner Brett Yormark. It says, I deeply regret the comments that I made, blah, 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 blah. Because you can't say that. You can't say that you hope that one school in your conference beats another. You can't do it. And yet he did it. It's just a really bad look from the conference commissioner. I've seen clueless and classless and blah, blah, blah. I won't go that far because I think it's okay to feel that way. Their actions put the conference in a really difficult spot where survival looked like it might not be possible. So to have that sentiment towards those two schools, I don't have an issue with. I have an issue with saying it in public. You can't give anyone more fodder for accusations of wrongdoing, favoritism, impropriety, whatever you want to say, because we live in an age where if things don't go my way, it was rigged, everyone's against me, blah, 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 blah. It can't just be that Texas Tech beat Texas. Every time a flag happens against Oklahoma or Texas in 2023, there is going to be someone trying to trend on Twitter that it's hashtag rigged, hashtag whatever, because everybody already knew that that feeling was there, but you can't give credence to it. You can't say, hey, you know what? I'm hoping that this school beats that school in my conference, no matter what that school is doing after the 2023 season. You can't do it. And I feel like that shouldn't have to be said. And I'm guessing that Brett Yormark didn't think that this is all going to be broadcast on Twitter and it's all going to go out into the great beyond, and it's going to get legs of its own. He probably thought, I'm speaking to these people, these Red Raider fans who are super excited that, we've got this new day in our conference, blah, 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 and didn't think this is going to catch fire. Well, it did, and that's a problem. I don't know how that happens. You don't have enough foresight, awareness to go, I would love to say this, but I can't say this. So you can't say it, and he said it. Meanwhile, I think this is really cool. Memphis is doing a fun ticket promotion. Now, unfortunately, it's because I think their season ticket sales have been slashed in half because the support hasn't been all that great. The team hasn't been as great as it once was in the last decade or so. There's some apathy there that we're never going to get into a Power 5 conference, etc. So there are tickets available, and Memphis is doing a deal, which I think is cool and fun, and other schools should try it. Maybe not at this price point, but whatever. If you buy a ticket for $60 to Memphis's home opener against Bethune-Cookman, and they win, the university will give you a free ticket to the next game. So you buy a $60 ticket to watch Memphis play Bethune-Cookman, an FCS school, an HBCU. Probably like your chances of winning that game. If you buy a $60 ticket to that game, we'll give you a ticket to the next home game against Navy for free. And if Memphis beats Navy, they'll give you a free ticket to the next home game against Boise State. And if they beat Boise State, the tickets just keep on rolling. For every home victory, you get a free ticket if you bought a $60 ticket to Bethune-Cookman. It's almost gambling a little bit. Like, you feel the odds are pretty good that you're going to beat Bethune-Cookman. So if you spent $60 on this one ticket, you get a free ticket to Navy. If you beat Navy, that $60 ticket essentially turned into a $20 ticket for 3 games. If you beat Boise State, the price just keeps going down. And Memphis has a pretty, for the American, they have a pretty good home schedule. Bethune-Cookman at Navy, Boise State, Tulane, USF, and SMU. So in that, you have a service academy, which is always going to pump you up a little bit attendance-wise and fun-wise, because it's always fun to play a service academy. It's always a better atmosphere. It's always more pageantry and that stuff. It's cool. Boise State has been a G5 power and played in New Year's Six bowl games. Tulane played in a New Year's Six bowl game and beat the Heisman Trophy winner, who we'll talk about in a little bit, last year. USF is USF. And SMU is looking to get into a Power 5 conference. And they've been pretty good. So the Memphis home schedule is pretty good. But I like I think it's genius, first of all. It's fun. It's exciting. It's gambling a little bit with your fans. Like, hey, how much do you believe in your favorite football team? You're going to pony up $60 to watch us play Bethune-Cookman to potentially get 3 or 4 extra games for free out of the deal? Let's gamble a little bit. I mean, Memphis is on the river. Let's roll that dice. It's fun. It's interesting. It's entertaining. It's forward-thinking, and it's stuff that I think somebody should, down the line, pick up at their school and say, you know what, hey, if this is going to put more butts in the seats and more dollars in our pocket, let's do it. Because likely, if you are a Memphis fan, is the home opener against Bethune-Cookman going to move that needle for you? Probably not. So you're looking at a sparse crowd to open the season. And generally, unless you're going to be, one of the top 25 teams or anything like that, your attendance isn't going to get better throughout the year. So you don't want to start the year off low and just keep getting lower. But you put a little incentive for your fan base to come on out and watch maybe a bad week 1 game in exchange for seeing Navy, Boise, and Tulane for free. I don't think that's a bad deal. Also, in the college football power brokers comments arena, Jack Swarbrick was on the Dan Patrick Show yesterday. And he had interest. Dan Patrick Show, by the way, broadcasting in Dublin, Ireland, before the week 0 matchup between Navy and Notre Dame. And Notre Dame athletic director Jack Swarbrick, who is going to retire, had this to say about the state of college football and college athletics as a whole.
Complete disaster.
How did we get here, Jack?
I wish I knew. And listen, I'm not. Everybody in the industry has to take responsibility here. I'm not excluding myself from that. I think the decision making has lost its way in terms of the focus on the student athlete and what's primarily best for them. But we are where we are, and we have to try and make it work. I mean, we've been pretty vocal in the past month about we need to find a home for Stanford and Cal. That you can't have 2 of the great academic institutions in the world not have a place to play.
So that's Notre Dame athletic director Jack Swarbrick on the Dan Patrick Show. And I find the comments interesting because, we've taken the decision-making away and the priority from student athletes to financial decisions. Jack, you're the AD of Notre Dame. You mean the school that is king of making strictly financial decisions? Why didn't Notre Dame join a conference ever? Because we value our independence and because NBC was giving us lots of money to not join a conference. So you can't then in 2023 say, oh man, everybody's just thinking with their pocketbook these days. You're Notre Dame. You're the trendsetter. You're the one who started it. It's like saying that it's preposterous to me that the AD of Notre Dame is like, oh, all college football is about now is money. Yeah, it is. You know who started it? You. What? And then you can't then be like, well, you got these conferences now where you've got, schools in the Pacific time zone and the Eastern time zone. You're Notre Dame. You have been the one who we want to play a national schedule every year. We want to play in California and in Texas and in the Northeast. Bruh, you can't be the one to be the champion of switching the model and the thinking in college sports. He did take some blame or some of the heat for everybody now shifting to that model. But you started it. You don't get to be the moral compass. Notre Dame's athletic director doesn't get to be the moral compass of college football. No matter how much you'd like to be. You don't get to play that role. I'm sorry, but you don't. So to then have these public comments of, the state of this college football, it's a disaster. Bruh, you're part of the problem. What makes you think you're not part of the problem? I don't get it. I don't understand how you get to that thought process as the Notre Dame athletic director. I think there's a bit of a holier than thou, I guess pun intended, sentiment that comes with holding that position. But you don't get to be the moral compass of college football as the Notre Dame athletic director. Jack Swarbrick was the athletic director at Northwestern or Illinois or Boston College or Wake Forest or Vanderbilt. Sure, you can sit there and complain about the state of college football all you'd like. But when you're part of the problem, no, sir. Doesn't fly. Speaking of the way that college football has evolved and the thought process, it was 2 years ago today, August 24th, 2021, that the historic alliance was put together between the Big Ten, Pac-12, and ACC to combat the SEC and to a lesser extent the Big 12. That those three conferences made their historic alliance to combat the way that the SEC was approaching essentially college football. And in the original press conference, the historic alliance was put together it was created to, quote, stabilize a volatile environment, end quote, in college sports and prioritize student athlete well-being over money. 2 years ago, that was we want to stabilize a volatile environment and prioritize student athletes over well-being, student athletes' well-being over money. 2 years. And in those 2 years, the Big Ten has taken 4 schools from its alliance member, creating an even more volatile environment. It now features a conference that has schools in the Eastern, Central, and Pacific time zones. The Big Ten then ended a relationship of more than 40 years with ESPN because ESPN wasn't going to give them enough money. And now it's essentially telling the Big 12 that you should steer clear of any you should not stand in the way of the Big Ten and SEC's plans for the college football playoff. So, in less than 2 years, a group that was put together to stabilize a volatile environment made a volatile environment more volatile. It made the Pac-12 virtually unsustainable. Now, is it still on its last legs? Yes, technically. But is there a future for the Pac-12? I would argue no. It then prioritized money over student-athlete well-being. And I realize that priorities can change, thinking can change, all of those things. But when you sit in a meeting with 2 other conferences And when they're like, we want to stabilize a volatile environment. And you go, yep, yes, sir, hell yeah. And then less than 2 years later, you have essentially ended one of the other conferences. And make no mistake about it, you would love to raid one of the others. Not a great look. And then at the same time, when we're all in agreement, we want to prioritize student-athlete well-being over money. And then we're going to take USC, UCLA, Oregon, and Washington to make some of our student-athletes fly from New York City to Los Angeles to play a soccer game. Hypocrite's a pretty big word, strong word. Maybe it's too strong. But it certainly is hypocritical less than 2 years after you say we are committed to these values and then do nothing to uphold those values. Another topic that came out yesterday was Caleb Williams, the USC Heisman Trophy winning quarterback. He says he is not decided whether he will participate in the upcoming NCAA video game or not. First of all, I'll give you the Ron Burgundy, I don't believe you, Ron Burgundy.gif. I don't believe you. And then secondly, how many people that would have bought that game are now not going to because Caleb Williams is not going to be in it? It's not a lot. I just don't envision people saying, oh, man, I would have bought that game, but Caleb Williams isn't in it. Because there are just some things that aren't about you. And when people have been waiting for the game for a decade, you saying, I'm not going to appear because I'm going to get the same money as a backup lineman at Old Dominion, there's not going to be much sympathy for you. Nobody's going to say, like, oh, man, I was really looking forward to playing this game, but if Caleb Williams isn't going to be in it, it's just not how it works. And I don't think it's unreasonable for EA Sports to just say, hey, everybody in college football is going to get a flat fee. Because does Caleb Williams deserve more money from the game than a backup offensive lineman at Old Dominion? Probably. But we can't work out deals with every individual player. If like EA Sports, just you can't say, all right, so we're going to pay the starting quarterback at Ole Miss X amount of dollars and the starting quarterback at Coastal Carolina this figure. You can't do it. Everybody's got to get kind of the flat rate. And you either get the flat rate or you don't. And if you don't want to be in the game, that's fine. But there's the effort that is required to go back and forth and figure out how much you're paying who's getting paid what. Sorry, especially for the first version of the revamped game, it doesn't matter. There's not a college football player playing that will have a substantial effect on whether somebody's going to buy the video game or not. It's just the reality. There's not a player that is big enough, popular enough, famous enough, or dynamic enough as a player to make someone who's waited for the game 10 years to go, oh, hell, now I'm not going to buy it. So, sorry, but it's just not going to happen. And then finally, it's week 0, baby. College football is back on Saturday. If you don't know, week 0 is reserved for Hawaii, teams who are playing at Hawaii, and then teams who are virtually playing internationally. And if you put in a waiver of like, hey, here's why we want to play on week 0, the NCAA is probably going to say, yeah, that's fine. I do wonder, before we get to the slate of games and what we're looking at, I wonder if in the future, though, that schools, especially G5 schools in like Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, and maybe like even Virginia, if they don't petition to play in week 0, like not to play an extra game, but to have an extra bye week in their schedule, just because hurricane season has like wreaked havoc at times on the college football schedule. So Nobody wants to be in a situation where they only play 11 games because a game got canceled and you don't have anywhere to put it because of a hurricane. And especially at a G5 school, they need every football game they can get for revenue purposes. So I just wonder if somewhere down the line we don't see, a week 0 slate that includes not just Hawaii and teams who are going to play at Hawaii, but also you get a Coastal Carolina, an Old Dominion, an East Carolina, a Florida International, Florida Atlantic, etc. Because you don't want to be in a spot where we only played 11 games or we only had 5 home games or whatever, and we lost a game because we didn't have a bye week in here to shuffle this all around and make it work, and we ended up in a bad spot. But the week 0 schedule starts off with Navy versus Notre Dame in Dublin, Ireland. It's on NBC Saturday at 2:30 Eastern. All times will be Eastern because I live in the Eastern time zone. It's also known as God's time. So Navy, Notre Dame. It should be almost a practice for Notre Dame where you're figuring some stuff out and it's not a big deal and you got a fun experience out of the deal, but you should win comfortably. That's on paper. They don't play the games on paper. Navy will present challenges and Notre Dame will have to figure them out. Notre Dame has questions. I still think there are people feeling out Marcus Freeman. And I'm guessing he doesn't want to leave Ireland with any questions. So Navy versus Notre Dame, UTEP versus Jacksonville State is at 5:30 on CBS Sports Network. It's 7 o'clock on Saturday. UMass is playing at New Mexico State on ESPN. The next time that somebody tells you that ESPN runs college football, I want you to point to this schedule, where of all the games available in week 0, the game that's on ESPN is UMass at New Mexico State. Prime time, baby. USC is playing at 8 p.m. Eastern time on the Pac-12 network. The reigning Heisman Trophy winner, a team that played in a New Year's Six game, and a team that many project to make the college football playoff, is playing in week 0. They are by far, I guess not by far, they are one of 2 marquee programs playing this weekend. And that game is on the Pac-12 network. So nobody's going to see it. And the next time somebody tells you that ESPN runs college football, I want you to point out that in week 0, the game on ESPN was UMass and New Mexico State, while San Jose State and USC was on the Pac-12 network. I do find it somewhat interesting that Hawaii at Vanderbilt, which would conceivably be a much more prominent matchup for ESPN, is on SEC network. Now, obviously, SEC network didn't have any other options, but you would think that Hawaii Vanderbilt, which I think is similar to Navy Notre Dame in that for as much flack as Vanderbilt gets for being a poser in the SEC, they should handle Hawaii pretty handily Saturday. The over-under total for Vanderbilt, I think 3.5, hammer the over. I'm not a betting guy. You probably don't want to take a whole lot of betting advice from me. Hammer the over on Vanderbilt wins in 2023 because they're going to get one on Saturday. And I love Hawaii. There's nothing more than I love staying up. It's 1:30 in the morning. You're kind of dozing in and out. Ugh. And there was Colt Brennan chucking the pigskin. Those were fun days. But it's at 7:30 Eastern on Saturday. Ohio is playing at San Diego State, which is a fun week 0 matchup. Ohio played in the MAC championship last year. SDSU told its conference that it was going to leave for the Pac-12 and is kind of reneged on that and probably glad that they did. That's at 7 o'clock on Fox Sports 1, 8 o'clock San Jose State USC on the Pac-12 network. And then Florida International is at Louisiana Tech at 9 on CBS Sports Network. So just a small smattering of games. But again, I wonder how much in the future that there's a potential, like Coastal Carolina tells the NCAA, hey, I don't know if you've seen like the hurricane history for the last 15 years or so, but we're going to go ahead and play in week 0 against whoever just to make sure just to give us a little wiggle room in case. Florida International, Florida Atlantic, USF. I think it makes sense for some of those schools to say, hey, we should play as early as possible. And even if there's a hurricane this week, like there was a tropical storm in Los Angeles last week for the first time in 84 years or whatever the hell it was, you just want to give yourself a little bit of wiggle room. So week 0 has grown a little bit in prominence. I know that there are people who hate the week 0 name. Have a little fun. It's what makes college football different. Fun is different and unique, and having a week 0 makes no sense whatsoever. And yet, it sure is a lot of fun. So we'll be back on Sunday for a week 0 recap. We'll look at some of the previews for the Power 5 and Group of 5 conferences, and also maybe look at some college football playoff predictions. Who you got? I got some teams I don't know that you'd necessarily have. We'll chat about that on Sunday. This has been the Daily Huddle for Thursday, August 24th. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. Hit us up on Twitter. My name is Garrett Seawright. My Twitter handle is @GarrettSeawright, 2 R's, 2 T's in Garrett. And check out all the college football coverage on SaturdayGlory.com to stay up to date on America's best sport. Catch you on Sunday. Appreciate you making us a part of your day.